Hello, and thank you for joining us on the program Let's Talk on LoveWorldPlus, where we discuss varying issues as they affect society. Now, today, we will be looking at the Petroleum Industry Bill and Nigeria's economic projections. Now, the Petroleum Industry Bill, which is the bill meant to effectively regulate Nigeria's oil and gas sector, has experienced a lot of setbacks. The bill was first drafted in 2008, but got mired in politics with the varied interests, which resulted in several versions of the bill. Now, the current draft of the bill came into being after the minister set up a technical petroleum industry bill committee and review and harmonize the various versions of the old bill, and then come up with a new comprehensive draft that would address the concerns of stakeholders in the industry. Now, the question now is, how can these controversies which the bill is generating currently be addressed to pave the way for speedy passage of the bill into law? Now, these are just some of the questions that we hope to analyze and also answer in this edition of Let's Talk. And to help me do that, I'm joined by Taiwo Adedeji, who is a legal practitioner. He is a social expert as well as a public policy analyst. You're welcome to Let's Talk.
You're most welcome. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yes. Okay, so we're talking about the Petroleum Industry Bill, also known as PIB, and with the progress that we have been making so far. Now, the bill has delayed for a very long time. We keep hearing, you know, this version is out and that version is out, and people were wondering at some point, people actually thought it's been done away with. Nothing is going to come of it anymore. Now, because of that delay, there seemed to be some sort of pullback, you know, by investors, people who were meant to be stakeholders in that industry. Now, this, of course, is according to experts who say that as a result of this delay, people are drawing back, investors are drawing back. Do you agree with this assertion? How true is it?
Well, even though it is still existing in the realm of speculation, but it is very, very possible, because it's a reasonable conclusion that we can draw out that if there have been so much delay in itself has created a sort of uncertainties. There's no investor that want to invest in an economy where there is still uncertainty, because they have to be very sure of what is going to be the implication of their investments against the backdrop of the uncertainties and controversies that have been generated, you know, that has now occasioned the delay in the passage of the PIB. Okay. So to that extent, it may be true, though there are no statistics to actually say, look, investors, or these are the number of will-be investors that are drawing back by the slow pace of the passage of the PIB into law.
Okay. Now, let's talk a bit about these controversies. What exactly were the controversies? Because we know that the bill was meant to establish a legal framework, as it were, to sort of regulate, you know, maybe also come up with some institutions within the Nigerian petroleum industry. What were some of these controversies that brought about the delay in the passage of the bill?
You know, well, the first and foremost, you know, since it exists as a bill which is yet to be promulgated into law, most of the things that we get to know about the bill on a daily basis are through the media, or maybe watching some of the debates, you know, going on around or discussion, okay, you know, involving the bill. Well, you know, the controversy that has played up mostly, or in the loudest context, has been this issue of sectional controversy, where it is being, you know, alleged by, you know, in fact, it has created a sort of north-south, okay, you know, dichotomy, in the sense that, you know, for instance, there is an aspect of a bill that I understood to be, that is going to be creating a kind of 10% remittance for the local oil-producing communities, which are majorly situated in the south, particularly in the Niger Delta, okay, axis of the southern part of Nigeria. But legislators from other sections of the country are not feeling comfortable. They are not very comfortable with the content of that bill, because they are, in their own reckoning, they feel that it is going to create a kind of a double opportunity for the so-called oil-producing communities, in the sense that there's already this derivation principles, being created, which is a constitutional thing. Then the issue of giving them 10% remittance. So the northern legislators, we are told, are not comfortable with that provision of the bill. On the other hand, to actually counteract that, the opposition of the northern legislators, some southern legislators are also reading sectional meaning into the opposition, in the sense that there was this very loud allegation that 83% or thereabout of the Nigerian oil wells are owned by northerners. I don't know how far that is true, although that has been debunked effectively by even one of a southern activist who said that, look, it is actually the multinationals who are in control of these oil wells, not the northerners, because that is to create an impression that there is already a kind of indigenous control in the first place, which is one of the things that the petroleum industry bill is trying to create, that is trying to indigenize the ownership of the oil sector in the country. That's
talking about Nigerian content.
Nigerian content. That is what it's trying to bring a kind of maybe local content, that is the national content to it, as opposed to the current domination by the international investors, represented by multinational companies.
Okay, we'll still get back to that issue. Now, do you see a likely resolution of these controversies? Because these things still persist. I mean, yes, because of the sections within the country, there are always going to be some people that will feel we are going to be shortchanged by some of the provisions of this framework. So do you see a likely resolution of these issues within?
To me, essentially, it's an intra-class struggle, which is likely to be resolved one way or the other, because the same question played up itself, the same controversy during the indigenization era of the early 70s. You see, it is a kind of struggle between Nigerian local capitalists, permit me to use the word, because most of the time when the so-called national cake is being shared, the local capitalists believe that, look, this section of the country is getting more than fair share of the deal. And that has been the basis for the controversy. So, but in as much as the industrialists, the capitalists, they will always have a way of resolving their differences through maybe roundtable discussion and consensus. And at the end of the day, it will be resolved, because as much as the people who are feeling that they are being shortchanged, if their fears are addressed, I think it will be resolved. It's as simple as that.
Okay, well, if you are just joining, we're still looking at the Petroleum Industry Bill, or the PIB, and Nigeria's economic projections. I'm still talking with Taiwo Adedeji, who is a legal practitioner, a social expert, as well as a public policy analyst. All right, now back to the bill. Now, Nigeria's Petroleum Minister, Alison Madueke, said that the new bill would look at the unbundling of the nation's petroleum company, which is the NNPC. It would also look at the creation of an inspectorate unit, and also independent regulatory agencies, as well as a fiscal regime in the oil and gas sector. Now, can you throw some more light on some of these reforms that I just mentioned and how they're supposed to aid the sector?
Well, like I said earlier, most of the reforms that are contained in the bill, to the best of my knowledge, so far so good, are things that we get to, read through the media. We can't say until the bill becomes law. That is when we can say with a kind of precision that this is what is going to be the content of the bill. So to that extent, everything still exists in the realm of speculation. And in the mind of those who are championing the promulgation of the bill, or those who are in the position, it is not you and I that are in position to actually effect the bill becoming a law. So until that time, I just believe that so far, there are still areas that the bill has not addressed. All the areas like the issue of NNPC, I don't know what the minister intends or what the bill intends to do with NNPC, but I believe that NNPC should still exist, but with a sort of reform and organization. I believe the bill should not be talking about privatization of NNPC, which has been one of the programs in the successive government in Nigeria, which has been one of the agenda that has been yet to be implemented. NNPC should not be privatized. Rather, they can give the so-called local investors the opportunity to create their own industries that will rival and compete with NNPC under a fair competitive atmosphere. The issue, I believe, I don't know what the bill is saying on the issue of bunkering, illegal oil activities, because if you look at the issue of bunkering activities, the attention it has generated, I don't think bunkering, it is small fries who are involved in bunkering. So the bill should address things like that. There should be criminal sanction, more criminal sanction for illegal oil exploration activities. So those are some of the things that I believe the bill should address. It is. I don't think the indication given by the minister is all exhaustive. There should still be areas that the bill will have to, address in order for it to actually reflect the national character that the bill is meant to be.
Okay. Now, going back to what the minister said as one of the reforms within that bill, she talked about an inspectorate unit, some monitoring agencies, and that's making me wonder. Now, before the bill, did we have a monitoring body or an organization or an institution that was responsible for monitoring activities, both in the upstream and downstream sector of the petroleum industry? Because, I'm asking in the light of the revelations that have come forward. You will remember during the fuel subsidy probe, we heard about the millions and billions of monies that were siphoned. So did we have anything, did we have a monitoring institution before this bill?
Before this bill, I think we've heard about DPR, Department of Petroleum Resources. So that's the kind of a monitoring, body. But I believe that a monitoring body of a national importance should not just be for the purpose of inspecting petrol stations who are selling above fuel pump price.
Is that what DRP was doing?
That is what DPR, that is what we hear them doing most of the time. The issue, because if DPR has actually been living up to its responsibilities, the issue of the controversy, the corruption, the large scale, the scandal generated by this fuel subsidy probe shouldn't have been in the first place, because DPR has always been in a position to arrest some of these tendencies before they get to a scandalous level and national embarrassment like we had it during the fuel subsidy crisis. So if the PIB may create its own unit, we need a kind of institution where institutions should be strengthened rather than creating multiple enforcement institutions. However, if there is need for those enforcement institutions to be created, their roles should be clearly defined within the statute, and there are limits, and there should be a meeting point where they can work together.
Okay.
Like, I understand a section of the bill, like Section 9, for instance, creates a kind of PTB, Petroleum Technical Bureau, or something like that. But I also see a kind of tyrannical display of power, the implication at the end of the day, because that's made that particular unit as if it's a unit under the minister's office. So that way now, if you have a power-drunk minister for petroleum and industry, there will be crisis by creating that kind of body that ordinarily supposed to be independent of the minister's office, and now make it an appendage of the minister, and as if it exists as a unit. In fact, it is created by Section 9 of that proposed bill. It is created as a unit of the minister's office. So, and things like that should rather not be.
Okay. What about the Petroleum Price Regulatory Agency? How effective were they in terms of monitoring, what was going on?
They've not been effective. It is very obvious that they've not been effective. And you see, a semblance of impunity is often created whenever there is a fuel crisis in Nigeria. And that is why the so-called oil price monitoring agency, they've been rendered as a toothless bulldog, like it happened the last time when people took laws into their hand. You saw, during the last scarcity, filling stations were selling 140 naira per litre, 130 naira per litre, and this so-called regulatory, body is there as a toothless bulldog, not being protective of the interests of the masses. So to that extent, we say Nigerians have even lost confidence. Nigerians have lost confidence in that kind of, we don't even believe that that kind of price monitoring unit even exists in the first place, because if it exists, why should I go to a police station, a filling station situated in a very conspicuous part, of the metropolis, and I'm being told that, look, it's 130 naira, it was 130 naira per litre, whereas what is reflected in their meter is 97 naira per litre.
Okay, we're still on it, the petroleum industry bill and Nigeria's economic projections, we're still on it. Now, earlier you talked about the fact that you are expecting to see stiffer penalties meted out to maybe those who indulge in criminal activities within the sector, and that we've not yet been seeing that, we've not yet seen that. Do you think that is, as a result, do you think that is a reflection of perhaps the government's unwillingness to tackle the issue of corruption? I mean, if there are no harsh penalties for those who would flout the law, then it means that people would go ahead and, engage in these nefarious activities.
Yes, I think, the question in itself has actually provided a sort of answer, or a dimension of what the answer is likely to be. Because, you see, one of these popular sayings in our jurisprudence and even international jurisprudence is that the greatest incitement in the hand of a criminal or in the mind of a criminal is the hope of getting, of escaping punishment. Okay. If a would-be criminal has this optimism that, look, he's going to escape from being punished, of course, it is an incitement. It is a drive, he's been driven to do more, in criminal activities. So the issue of corruption, there's no way we can separate the issue of fight against corruption, the war against corruption, from the oil sector, because that is the mainstay of Nigerian economy for now. And we can see the monumental scandal that was actually revealed during the probe, the subsidy probe. Criminal activities persist today. We continue to hear sad news in the media that vendors, pipeline vendors are attacking maybe NNPC officials. Things like this are happening because no one has been made a scapegoat. There's this rumor, and when you do things like this, you give room for rumor mongering among the citizens who feel that they are untouchables, that most of those small fries, that they are even at the forefront of siphoning fuel. They are just working for some godfathers in the background. And it appears so. There are reasons to, because since I've not had a public trial of a suspected, vendor. And these criminal activities continue to be, it has generated a lot of attention in the media and even in the international sector. Because the last time there was this major oil disaster somewhere where vendors were operating, most of us got to see it from international media for the first time, from CNN, something that is happening in my own country. I saw it for the first time on CNN. So that's very sad. It doesn't give room. That does not reflect that there's a serious battle, against corruption.
Corruption in that. Okay, now let's go back to some of the issues that brought controversy within that bill. Now, the senators, in talking about it or trying to pass the bill, they criticized the perceived unlimited powers that are given to the Minister of Petroleum Resources. Now, parts of the powers as provided in the bill include powers to reassign licenses to operators within the industry. It also talks about granting of waivers, grant and revoke leases unconditionally, order the Auditor General access to some documents, and is also empowered to appoint the management of host community funds. What's your view about these powers given the minister, in your own opinion?
Well, in my own opinion, it is very obvious. Like I said, there is this saying that power corrupts in itself, but absolute power now corrupts absolutely. By the time you create this kind of absolute power residing in only one individual in the name of a minister of petroleum and energy, you see, it's a recipe for crisis and for tyrannism, because if a minister who is power drunk, like I earlier said, will actually abuse that kind of power, you know, it should not, it does that kind of over-concentration of power does not reflect our democratic culture. And we only see, that is one of the drawbacks of this presidential system that I am very critical about, because it's about individualism. Even though pretentiously we say you are the representative of the people, but then if a minister, an appointee, who is there, as far, although it might have been appointed, she might have been appointed by the president, but the minister is just, under a parliamentary system, she's ordinarily one of the elected, you know, representative of the people. But then, if we now concentrate that kind of power, all, you know, embracing power in the hand of an individual, it's not healthy for the industry.
Okay.
And it may defeat, ultimately, at the end of the day, defeat the purpose for which the PIB is being promulgated in the first instance.
Okay, what about another section of the bill which gives the president the unilateral powers to grant oil licenses? Some people say it's against best practices. What do you think?
Yes, that is section 119,
yes.
if I'm correct.
Yes.
That section of the bill, giving the president, is still the same thing, because it's a kind of, if you have a power-drunk president, that kind of a section should not exist in the bill, because the president is just an individual. If you are giving him maybe the honor or a ceremonial honor of maybe being the one to sign certain things, you know, but then if he has the all-inclusive power of granting licenses and even determining when to give licenses, that kind of power will not all go well for the, in fact, it may defeat the purpose for which the bill is, because Nigeria is a country, we have to be very sensitive to our situation and our background. That what it means is that if we now have a president, a president must come from a section of the country. Yeah. And sectional interpretation will surely be read to the actions of president, particularly when it appears that, oh, it's like some sections of the country are being favored, you know, to the detriment of other sections of the country. That kind of power should not be, like, I agree with those who say it is against the best practices. It is no longer, you know, it's undemocratic, you know, so to say. Okay. So,
all right, I'm going to ask you my last question. Remember, I said that we would go back to the issue of creating Nigeria content within this industry, which you mentioned earlier is sort of dominated by foreign investors, you know, the multinational companies and all of that. Now, how exactly do you think that we can achieve that, you know, bringing Nigerian content within the industry?
I think the bill as it exists in this form provides enough mechanism to reflect the Nigerian content. It's kind of a bill that will bring the national character of what the petroleum industry law should be this time around. It will reflect if it's eventually passed into law. I believe that the only thing, I have a reservation about over promoting private sector, whether local or international, because at the end of the day, the people, we are still talking about the involvement of the people of Nigeria. It is not everybody who is empowered to own an oil and gas company. So at the end of the day, it will still favor the local capitalist who will use it to still exploit the Nigerian citizens like their international counterparts who ordinarily are doing. So that in itself will not solve much of our economic problem. It will only empower the local industrialist to own more and to have more. So, but we should also be thinking about the people. In what way has that, will that bring food to the table of the ordinary citizen? So that's my take on that.
Okay, we've been talking about the petroleum industry bill and Nigeria's economic projections. It's been an insightful discussion. And as Nigerians wait for the final passage of that bill, we are expecting to see a balanced bill. We are expecting to see things that are going to take care or adequately represent the Nigerian and not just favor a few persons, like some of the things that we've talked about in this particular discussion. So while we are waiting for that, we are hoping to see that all of these things will be represented in that final copy of the bill. I have been talking with Taiwo Adedeji, who is a legal practitioner. He's a social expert as well as a public policy analyst. Thank you so much for coming on Let's Talk, and hopefully we will be back to talk about it some more. Hopefully by then it would have been passed into law as well. I'd like to thank you very much for being part of today's discussion. Let's Talk on LoveWorldPlus. We will do this again tomorrow, where we will be talking about another interesting and insightful issue as it is affecting Nigerian society, and not just Nigerian society, but Africa as a whole.